I'll just hit that now. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have you with us, particularly on this very important subject around young people and enabling them to share their faith. So hopefully this afternoon we'll be seeking to explore the ways we can embolden and encourage young people to share their faith and talk openly about God appropriately and authentically with their peers and wider networks. So hopefully we'll have a really good afternoon, and we've planned for this to last for an hour and a half, so we should be finished by 3:30. And I'm very excited to begin our time together. And I just want to start with a Bible reading. I'm going to read from Matthew chapter 9 verses 35 to 38. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and illness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field." I think Jesus identifies two features of our age. The harvest is plentiful and the workers are few. And I hope that this afternoon just helps us to encourage and inspire the younger generation to be a part of the workers and part of enjoying reaping the harvest. So I'm very excited to introduce our hosts and panel for the afternoon. So my name's Tom and I work at Cliff College. I'm the evangelist here at the college. I'm in my office this afternoon. We're partially back in lockdown with some of our students, the residential ones, returning, which includes the Cliff Year, which is a gap year programme for those interested in the 18 to 25 age group, particularly in mission and evangelism, but some time to think about vocation as well. And in my role, it means I'm a part of the Methodist Evangelism and Growth team. And in that role, I specifically thinking about young evangelists and thinking about a young evangelist movement for the Methodist Church, which means I get to work very closely with Holly, and hopefully you can see her on your screen, that she might be waving at you. Holly is on the Evangelism and Growth team, and her role is the Evangelism and Contemporary Culture Officer. She joined us in June, so I've never met her in real life, but seen her lots on screen. Look forward at some point to meeting her. But my role also means I get to work with another connectional team, which is the Children, Youth and Families team. And Meg is from that team. She's with us this afternoon, and her role is Youth and Young Adults Development Officer. And then we've got a really exciting panel of people that have taken up the invitation to speak to us this afternoon. One, unfortunately, has a shift at work this afternoon, so I've pre-recorded her and we can watch that video later on. Her name's Natalie, and she was on the Cliff Year last year in 2019 to 2020, and Natalie's 19 years old and's got lots to share on this subject. And then hopefully Dean can wave at you. Dean was part of the PAYS movement for 3 years as a volunteer from 2017 to 2020, which really particularly focused working with young people and mission, and he'll be able to tell you more about that before he shares later. He's also a Methodist local preacher in training. He's 25. And then Ollie, here hopefully you can see, he's just waving there, I notice. Ollie's a student, he'll tell you more about that. He's 19 years old. He's also got a YouTube channel, which has got some fantastic content on it, and we'll give you the link to that in the chat later on. It includes a video of 5 ways to share your faith at school. Also some topics on calling and hope, and an interesting interview around the Black Lives Matter, which I recommend to you. already there's 348 subscribers on his channel, so perhaps there'll be a few more later this afternoon, which is great. So yeah, let me begin with prayer, and then I'll pass over to Holly, who will help us to meet one another before we meet the panel again. Lord God, we just thank you for this time this afternoon to really explore this subject, to encourage our young people to share their faith. Yeah, Lord Jesus, we thank you that you are the great evangelist and that we have that wonderful model to follow. Help embolden us as we help to embolden the next generation. We pray for your blessings upon this time. Amen.
Hello everyone, it's great to be with you here this afternoon. So just to help us all get to know each other a little bit, we're going to break into some smaller groups into breakout rooms. Tom's going to put us into breakout rooms. And there are a couple of questions I just want you to explore together that I'm about to post in the chat, and I will also send them into the breakout rooms as well. And it's just to help us get to know who's here, get to know one another, and get to start sharing a little bit about our experiences with young people and our own experiences of faith as well. So Tom can put us into the breakout rooms now.
Yeah. Welcome back everybody, back to the main room. I hope you had some good conversations with one another, and I think yeah, hopefully some interesting stories about significant faith moments in our teenage years, which statistically is the time when most people come to faith in Jesus Christ, and an important part in people's journeys and faith development. We might have a chance to come back to those later on in the webinar, but we'd like to continue by speaking with our panel. And as I said earlier, Natalie, unfortunately, her work schedule meant she's working this afternoon in the end from 2 o'clock onwards, but she pre-recorded with me on Friday. So Natalie was on the Cliff Year, our gap year program at Cliff College last year, and yeah, this is what she had to say. So we'll move into a video now. Hello, Natalie. Thank you very much for joining us for our webinar, and we're really excited to hear what you can share with us, your stories and things that you think might help us explore this question of how we can help teenagers to share their faith authentically, and really excited to hear from you. So yeah, perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about you, Natalie, who you are and where you're from.
Okay, so like you've heard, my name is Natalie. I'm 19 years old and I live in Moberley, which is a tiny village near Manchester, and I go to Moberley Methodist Church.
Super, thanks very much. And yeah, so where would you like to begin? I'll let you.
All right.
Yeah, thanks.
So today I thought I'd come talk about my experiences in evangelizing to young people as a young person myself. And wow, that's quite a topic to fit into short 10 minutes, but let's go for it. So by now, some of you might have picked up that I've got a slight accent there. And that's because I moved here to this country from South Africa about 4 years ago now. And yeah, so I thought I knew quite a bit about what evangelism was, what it looked like, because I grew up as a minister's daughter. So I thought, oh, invite your friend to church, you have a talk about what God is. I know what evangelism looks like. But moving to England completely threw that out of the water. It's a whole different story here. So it was quite interesting because I almost got to look at it with fresh eyes. I got to relearn everything I thought I knew about evangelism after I moved here. And there were a few things in particular I noticed. So here the young people, they don't really talk about God or Christianity just among themselves, which I found quite strange, but I noticed that a lot of people can see Christianity in the church as outdated or irrelevant in today's society. And so many people, when I went to my new school, already had a preconceived notion of who I was and what I'd be like as one of those religious people. So, to be honest, I thought this was crazy before they'd even met me. So I really had to start thinking about how I'm going to overcome all this, how I'm going to talk about my faith. And I was quite scared to talk about God in the face of all this, going to a new school, trying to make friends, and just trying to get through the school year. So what I did was I prayed, and I prayed that God would give me the courage to speak about him to new friends, or that he would help my friends to ask about my faith, because then I wouldn't have to go out and just say it. And lo and behold, the very next day, this one girl comes along, and she kind of started with, "So you're one of those people who believes in God, right?" And I was like, "Yes, Lord, here it is. This is what I wanted." And yeah, it was just amazing. I started telling her everything I could, and I thought it was great. And she would ask me questions all of the time. She would ask me questions in the middle of class or on the PE field, and she was one of those people who would send you questions at 2 a.m. and expect an answer. So she really, really worked me hard. And what I found was often these weren't easy questions. These were really difficult, hard questions to answer. And I had to say sometimes, I don't know, and I'd have to go back to the Bible, and I'd have to ask my friends and my family for advice, Christian friends, and pray about it before I could even come back to her with an answer. And a lot of the time, I was so scared of messing it up and giving that one wrong answer, or just the wrong kind of thing that would drive her away from the faith. And so I was quite scared of that. But one thing I noticed was all of this extra time I was spending researching, reading my Bible, praying, it actually was bringing me so much closer to God and deepening my relationship with him. And I thought that was amazing, because as she was growing closer to God, I found myself doing that as well. And I loved it. It was amazing. So as time went on, we kind of hit a standstill, and I noticed that we weren't really getting anywhere with my friend. So eventually I had to say to her, "I don't always have all the answers, but why don't you come along with me to my Bible study, and there'll be more people there, more opinions, and you can learn more that way." So luckily for me, she said yes. And honestly, it's incredible, because now 2 years later, she gave her life to the Lord, and she has such an incredible faith. And in a moment of true irony, I often find myself going back to her and asking her for advice or questions. And yeah, but this isn't to say it was easy at all. It was really difficult, and I find it's always hardest to talk about God to people you care about, people your own age or your friends, because there's a constant fear of being judged or losing the people closest to you. But one thing I found that really helped me is to remember all the way through that we're all just people, and we're made by a God who just loves us so, so much. And in the end, as you're evangelizing, you're doing it for him. You're merely a tool, and it's God himself who's working through you. Sometimes you just have to be brave and trust in God that he's going to give you the right words to say in that moment. So another thing I found about the British in my time here is that they love a good debate. And I found that a lot of the time when I'd be trying to talk about my faith, people would come in and they would just throw facts at me. So I remember this one girl came up to me and she said, "Well, I do theology, and here is this quote, and in the Bible was written in this original language, and then it was translated, and then it was retranslated. And in this quote, you can see they've changed this word to mean virgin. So Mary wasn't a virgin, actually." And wow, I don't know what to say. I'm not that smart. So I had to go away and do a whole lot of research before I could even come back with any kind of answer for that. And over time, as I found people throwing these facts at me, I just found myself memorizing hundreds and hundreds of facts about science and history and all these things to prove that the Bible is real and this is it here and it happened and it existed and it's amazing. But what I found through all of that, while I learned a whole lot of useful knowledge and facts, is you can argue facts back and forth until you're blue in the face, and you can prove your point time and time again, but sometimes it's just not going to get you anywhere. And what I've started to think about that is it's because we're such a cynical generation. We've grown up seeing how facts on the internet can lie to us. And just to know that there's an answer for everything, it's only a phone or the internet away. You can learn anything these days. And so facts can lie to you. So I found, I don't know, maybe evangelizing with facts works for some people, but for me in particular, the thing that's been most effective is really going back to the root of it all and the feeling, you know, the love Jesus had for us on the cross, or the joy of forgiveness. I found that these are the things that are more likely to reach people than anything else. And so there's obviously many other things that help along the way. So I would have really struggled to evangelize to anyone without my own Christian base. Because when I left South Africa, I left my youth group behind, I left all my friends, but my family came with me, and there was a new church here. And just the instant support, the prayer, the advice that they give you, I couldn't have gone on evangelizing without it. I couldn't have come up with the answers or had the strength to just go for it. And the Bible does say we should surround ourselves with other believers because they're the ones who'll keep us accountable and give us wisdom for these situations, these instances. So another thing I could never evangelize without is prayer. Because when you evangelize, you're essentially speaking for God in that moment and you're working with him. It's impossible to do that without being in a constant conversation with him. And I found that prayer is the only thing that gives me the confidence and the strength to go out and evangelize. I mean, when I was evangelizing to this one friend, half the time it was talking to her, half the time it was praying in my head, honestly. And especially with young people, I find you need strength to go out for it because they can seem so scary on the surface. But a lot of the time you hear people talking about how to evangelize to young people and young people as this big, scary, impossible task. But what you have to remember is that we're all just people and we have complex feelings and doubts, and young people are smart and they're learning where they stand in the world, and they're breaking away from childhood beliefs and finding out what they themselves believe in. So you shouldn't be afraid to talk to them, because if there's ever a time to reach out, this is it. Finally, what I'd end off with saying is the one thing I've really found is it's not an instant process always. So you can't be upset if after one meaningful conversation you don't see a radical change. Sometimes you've just got to trust in God that the seeds you've been planting are going to grow over time in the lives of these young people, because God has a plan for everyone, and in the end he's got his own timing and he'll manage it. So that's kind of what I would say.
Ashley, thanks so much. That's really, really helpful. What is it in those teenage years that you'd say was the most important thing in helping equip you, like from adults around you who are supportive of helping you be confident to be a Christian authentically in your school day, which like you said, not an easy place to be. Like what was best in terms of equipping you?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. But, I think definitely I would say my family. I'm lucky enough that my family is all Christian, and they obviously moved with me. So whenever I needed that help or I needed that advice, they were there for me. But it is a really difficult thing, evangelizing. And I found that it was so amazing to evangelize to people that I actually wanted to carry on more and learn a bit more about it. So I actually went for the Cliff year, the gap year at Cliff College last year, the one for evangelism and mission. And I found that was really amazing, because got a whole lot more techniques and learning, and how to talk to people, how to sit down one-on-one and be able to have a conversation about it and not make it this big scary thing. So I would say I definitely feel a bit more equipped now.
Cool. Yeah, it was great to have you on the cliff here, Natalie. You were such an enthusiastic person, and willing to see new ideas and get involved, which was fantastic. Yeah, that's really helpful. I think to have someone that you can just bounce off with, to seek advice, and I guess to someone who's therefore is then praying for you when you're asked questions that might cause doubt and fear and embarrassment. To have a supporter and someone who's then giving you the same that same opportunity that you're giving your friend who's exploring. You're being able to explore with somebody. I think that's really helpful. Yeah,
sure.
Natalie, thanks so much. And if you're not at work, you'll be around later for some questions. We'll see. But really appreciate that. Thank you very much. God bless.
Thanks.
So, unfortunately, Natalie is at work and not available for questions. But that reminds me, if you'd like to ask any questions to the panel this afternoon, feel free to put them into the chat. Just hit to everyone, and Meg will be picking up on those for us to look at later. I'm going to hand over to Dean now, who's can tell us first a little bit more about his time with the PAYS movement, and then he's been thinking about this topic and he'll share with us his thoughts.
Cool. Thanks, Tom. As Tom said, I spent the last 3 years working with the PAYS movement, which is a charity that runs a gap year. And the tagline of PAYS is missionaries making missionaries. So I was a missionary. It just so happened that the past 2 years I spent at my own church. But I went into schools from the church and worked with the young people to help them share their faith. One of the big things about PAYS that we learn about is taking young people on mission and doing mission with young people. And so we were given monthly mission projects. We had to do a mission project every month, and these range from things like setting up a table in the town centre and handing out free hot chocolates and things, and then going into like a retirement home and spending time with the people in there, just chatting to them, doing projects in schools and things with the young people that are in their schools. And we usually did this under the banner of Because You're Loved, which is just a really kind of good, simple tool to share your faith in these kind of situations, because it can be kind of scary to go up to somebody and say, hey, you know what, God loves you. But if you're doing something that shows them that they're loved, if you're chatting to them, spending time with them, or if you're giving them a free hot chocolate, then you can also, while you're doing that, just give them a little business card that says Because You're Loved. And I haven't actually got a one on me, but I found a picture on my phone, so you can kind of see what it's like. And that's just a little business card that you give them and you say, oh, you know, we're just doing this because you're loved. And then that can hopefully lead into further questions like, oh, you know, what does this mean? Who loves me? Well, let me tell you about Jesus. And things like that. And it was just a really good way of helping young people to share their faith, to show them that it's important and to actually model it ourselves. And this is a little bit based off of Jesus sending the disciples out to go and to you know, to talk about the coming kingdom, to talk about Jesus. And Jesus didn't kind of just do this like at the end of the Gospels where you know, he gives them the Holy Spirit and sends them out to kind of spread the church. He does this while while he's still alive, while Jesus is still doing ministry. And the first time in Luke 9, Jesus sends out the 12 disciples. And really interestingly, after this story, Peter declares Jesus as Messiah. And so Peter hasn't actually said that Jesus is God, our Saviour, before he goes out on mission. He goes out on mission first, and then he declares Jesus as Saviour. So I think that's just a really important thing to say, is to not kind of think, oh, I can't take this young person on mission because, they're not saved, they haven't given their lives to Jesus or whatever. That actually we can all do it, and sometimes we find Jesus along the way, and I've seen young people that find Jesus along the way. And in Luke 10, Jesus then sends out the 72 as well to go and do the same things. And then Jesus uses that to kind of teach them a little bit about what doing that is like. So he doesn't necessarily give them all the information first. He does train them before that. But then he also helps them to learn from what they did. So, why this kind of prayer didn't work for this spirit or this sort of thing, and he figures it out after they've done it, which is a really important thing of taking them on mission. And of course, the 3 years that Jesus spent on mission, he took his disciples along with him and taught them along the way. So he didn't kind of just sit inside a building and teach them, he took them out, which is where that is all based on. But also, I think a really big part of what we did was kind of just being with the young people and making it an ordinary, normal thing to talk about Jesus. And I think that was one of the biggest things that really helped them. So we were often in their school, doing a lunch club in their cafeteria eating hall, kind of, saying, or we were doing our re-lessons or assemblies, or, the Because Your Love projects that we were doing. We were often there and we were talking about Jesus as we were doing it. We were really open with our faith, and just trying to make it normal for these young people. And 2 years ago, I think we started with about 5 young people in our little discipleship group that were, I think there were about 5. And they were kind of really new. They weren't Christians yet. And we worked with them. We kind of made it really normal to talk about Jesus. And for me, that was kind of like a really difficult thing to do as well. To not kind of compartmentalize Jesus and just talk about Jesus in this God slot here, but actually to just make it a part of everything that we were doing to talk about Jesus. And I think we really helped to model that, so that rather than, like, as I've had to do, and I've had to rewrite the way I think I do things and bring Jesus into everything that we do, rather than, compartmentalizing Jesus, is that it's helped them to see that actually Jesus is a part of their whole lives. And so there's this one particular girl from this group of 5 that I just want to share a couple of stories of her from. And it was the end of the first year that we've been working with her. And we were in a class doing an RE lesson. I think it was on identity. And we were doing this kind of task where, think about your dreams. What are your dreams? Put them down on a piece of paper. And in this particular lesson, the class teacher decided to go around the class and get each student to say what their dreams were. And so kind of they went round, and most of them were things like, I want a good job, I want lots of money, or cars, or a family, or something. And then this one girl that we've been working with, and I think she was a year 7 or a year 8 at the time, and she said that, my dream is to grow more in my Christian faith, and to be able to share that with other people. And I thought that was such an amazing thing to do in front of a class of peers at 12, 13 years old. To actually say that is a really bold thing to do. And it just really proved to me that actually, it's more natural for her to kind of share about her faith like that, because of what we've been doing, because of all the effort that we've been putting in. And it was hard work to kind of, especially going into the lunch hall, with a bunch of teenagers to talk about Jesus. It was really hard and scary stuff, but it just really, I think, paid off that actually she found it a normal thing to talk about Jesus, and she wasn't as scared to talk about it in front of her friends, her peers. And another story is in the youth group. The church started a youth group kind of from this 5, and it kind of grew and grew because they invited their friends and they invited their friends, etc., etc. And in one of these situations, we were kind of eating our tea, so we give them food. Kind of one of the really rough kids from the school, who, you know, some of the other students said, oh, you know, these are the really bad kids at school, came in and they were looking for their friend. And so I kind of looking around at the other leaders, and we're like, okay, what do we do? How do we handle this? And this girl just goes up to them and she's like, oh, this is the youth group. We're having fun. We're having food. We're going to talk about Jesus and things. You can join us. And we're, as leaders, kind of looking around and thinking, you know, what do we do? And she's just gone up really naturally to say, you know, look, you know, we're talking about Jesus. We're having fun. And it was just another really awesome moment for us. So I think that kind of modeling, just being really open with our faith, has really helped her. And there are other young people as well. Those were just particular stories that I think are really awesome to share with you. Yeah.
Thanks, Dean. That's really, really helpful. And really interesting to have had Natalie's cross-cultural perspective, moving school, not just moving school, but from a different country, different continent, and then with fresh eyes, being able to see what that's like, and what the situation is. And then from your point, Dean, of having worked in schools, and really interesting point to be working with young people, and not just giving them opportunities, but creating opportunities to share their faith, getting alongside them, to build confidence, so that eventually it becomes natural. I think that's really helpful. Thanks for that point, that reassurance even to us that we don't need to be perfect in order to do it. Thank you very much. So if you've got any questions for Dean later, do feel free to put those in the comments in the chat, and we'll pass those on for later on. Sorry about Natalie's video. I put a grey box for some reason over my face, but you just missed my reactions to her talking. Sorry about that. Finally, I'd like to invite Ollie to share with us. Maybe Ollie, if you could just introduce yourself again, just say where you are, and then over to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So my name's Ollie, and I'm a student up in Newcastle, and we're locked down at the moment, so this kind of sucks, but it's really great to be with you. And so Tom got in touch with me, and he asked me this question. He said, kind of, how can we embolden and encourage young people to share their faith and talk openly about God? And the first thing I kind of thought when I was asked this question is, why is this even a question? Why should we come asking this? Because it's a great question, is it? Like, we come, as you all have probably today, with this question: how and why should we embolden and encourage young people? And I think below this question lies our responsibility as Christians to do as we're told. Because if you look, oh, by the way, if you've got a Bible, I might just flick through, but don't fret, I'll just say it. So in Matthew 28, obviously the Great Commission, Jesus says, go and make disciples. And so, see, that is where we are asking this question from. How can we embolden and encourage young people to share their faith? What we're asking is how can we disciple disciples to disciple? Because that's what Jesus tells us to do. How can we, disciple, which is the embolden and encourage, disciples, the young people and our youth, to disciple, to share their faith? I love how it kind of slots in that. So that's where I kind of want to begin. That word, disciple. And what does disciple actually mean? I had a little Wikipedia Google of it, and disciple came up as learner. It basically means learner, which is slightly different from what we think of it as kind of a student. So a learner or a disciple in the ancient biblical world that we look at was someone who closely observed and then imitated both the life and the teaching of the master they were following, so that they were in relationship with that person. So when we say we want to create disciples out of these young people, what we're saying is we want to help them form apprentices who learn to observe and imitate Jesus from a space of awe and wonder. That's what we want. We want them to be in awe and wonder of Jesus, because from that, they start to imitate him. And that's really the question we're asking. Because the thing is, we can't just kind of make our youth do what they're told, as in like, go and share your faith, please, out of this kind of dutiful, rule-obeying thing, because that's not what a disciple means. It's not what a disciple of Jesus does. Because a disgruntled, dutiful, rule-obeying young person is actually what it means to be a slave to religion, not someone in relationship with Jesus. So yeah, I just want to say that we want to create those apprentices who learn to observe and imitate Jesus from a space of awe and wonder. But the thing is, I mean, that's like kind of the intro, but I've told you nothing new there. That's what we all knew. That's kind of the goal of what we want to do. But what I do want to do is I want to share with you my experience of how I was as a young person and still am in awe and wonder of Jesus. So I became Christian just a few years ago, actually, at a youth camp. I was invited by my mum's colleague, and I was struck actually by the kindness and love of the leaders, people like you guys, Christian men and women who themselves are in awe and wonder of Jesus, who are obeying and imitating him as well. And what filled them overflowed into me and the youth around us. And it is those youth leaders that really did it for me. And so what we want to be is we want to be Jesus in our lives and Jesus in the lives of the young people for us to overflow into their lives. So back to 2014. So I didn't go back straight to school and share my faith boldly. That came a few years later. But I'll tell you what did happen. I started to go to church regularly. I got involved with my youth group, a community of Christians. There were 3 of us, and we mostly just ate biscuits, played double, and read the Bible now and again. But the key thing that my youth leader did was he wanted us to fall in love with this book, using the Word of God to root us in our faith. And I mean, that was kind of the main thing we did during those sessions. But I came back from this youth camp, and the main thing I did during these sessions was I asked thousands and thousands and thousands of questions, because I was really struck by this God, this man, and this book as well. And I was in this kind of state of wonder. And maybe, I don't know, in your youth groups, you might have someone like that, someone who just won't stop asking questions. And maybe you feel like they're a bit annoying. Maybe you feel like they're a bit of a thorn in your side. But I'll share with you now what happened. So the crazy thing that my youth leader did, and that really encouraged me with all my questions, is he didn't actually answer a single one of my questions. See, not directly anyway. I went home every week feeling satisfied with the answers that I came to, but they weren't from my youth leader. I was the one who found the answers to my own questions. But before I continue, I want to say, I'm not trying to claim I'm some theology child prodigy, or that my youth leader just handed me a Bible and I found them myself. I'm not saying I did this on my own. I was in a community of people, and we were led very, very well. And there's that beauty in the community, I suppose. But the key thing that my youth leader didn't do was he didn't just dump a load of knowledge onto me, like some kind of weekly Bible lecture at our youth groups. So the key thing he did was he gave me space to work it through myself. And the main technique that I noticed that he used was he would answer the question I had with another question, which initially I found really annoying. But then I learned that he wasn't just being annoying to try and dismiss my question. He was doing so to really make me think, to test me and push me and challenge me. And when I reflect on how my youth leader did this, it made me think perhaps today, out of fear of losing our young people that we care about so dearly from our churches, we spoon feed them answers about Jesus and about God in our youth groups, out of fear that if we let them think for themselves, they might not get it, they might not understand, and they might get it wrong. But whether we like it or not, that's not how humans are made to learn things. And I kind of know this because my mum's a teacher. She was trained as a teacher 20 odd years ago now. But the way that teachers are trained, they're not trained to be lecturers who just reel off scripts and dump knowledge on people. Kind of like these days, teachers do what my youth leader did. They answer questions with more questions, so that they can develop, so the kids in their classes can develop and strengthen their own thinking and intuition for themselves. And that's what my youth leader did during our sessions. So I thought they are kind of some abstract ideas. So let's root it in the Bible. So if you've got a Bible, I mean, you can join me or not, but like turn to Matthew 9, and we'll start at verse 14. If not, don't fret, I'll read it through. So the context is Jesus is being asked about fasting. So some people are just coming up asking, I mean, a fair question about what they can eat, what they can't eat. So I'll just read from Matthew 9, verse 14. Then John's disciples came and asked him, how is it that we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast? Jesus answered, I love looking at these examples because I just love to imagine the faces of the disciples when, or not the disciples, the people who come and ask these questions. They come asking a fair question about food, and Jesus turns around and starts talking about a wedding and the bridegroom. And I mean, it seems very weird, but actually they got their answer, didn't they? Jesus isn't just dismissing their question, talking about whatever he wants to talk about. They get their answer. But the key thing that Jesus did was he made them think, so that once they got it, they truly got the real answer that they were looking for. So then another one is Matthew 12, and we'll go to verse 46. This is another great one. Jesus is with a group of people, talking outside, so I'll go there. While Jesus was still talking to the crowd, his mother and brothers stood outside, wanting to speak to him. And someone told him, your mother and brothers are standing outside, wanting to speak to you. He replied to him, who is my mother and who are my brothers? Pointing to his disciples. I just like the faces of the disciples, it just makes me giggle. And it's just like, it makes me think, Jesus was making a point here by using a question, and everyone was around the room must have been thinking, what is he on about? Oh, wait. Oh, he means us. I get it. And it just like clicked. Okay, and then there's one final one. Trust me, this is the kind of a good one as well. So the Pharisees come up asking a question about taxes. Fair? And they were trying to trick him. But let's just go Mark 12, and we'll go to, let's go from verse 14, halfway through there. Is it right to pay the poll tax to Caesar or not? Should we pay or shouldn't we? But Jesus knew their hypocrisy. Why are you trying to trap me? He asked. Bring me a denarius and let me look at it. They brought the coin, and he asked them, whose image is this, and whose inscription? Caesar's, they replied. Then Jesus said to them, give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. And they were amazed. I just like, it's so good. Because Jesus, what he's doing is, he's not just giving them a straight, simple answer that they can just eat and digest very easily. What it's making people do, and it's making us do, I suppose, today, I'm not going to go through it, don't worry, but making us really think about what is Jesus actually saying. And when this happened to me, when my youth leader did a very similar technique of answering questions with questions, is it made me think and strain. And then once I got it, it clicked. And it was revealed to me, and I understood it for myself. And this way of growing and learning and strengthening and becoming resilient to the Word of God and being able to read it and understand things better was designed by God. That's why Jesus uses it so well. And I came across this term, anti-fragile, to describe it, but I'll explain it using a sports analogy. So I'm a sports science student. So if you'll allow me, I'll use a sports example. So last year in my degree, we were looking at how the body grows muscle. And it's a process called protein synthesis. You don't need to know that if you're writing notes, don't worry. Mm-hmm. And it's how the body becomes stronger and more resilient. So the way the body does this is it actually rips itself apart. So you use dumbbells and weights, and it literally tears your protein and your muscles apart. So the more strain and pressure and trauma you place upon your muscles, the more they actually strengthen and grow and prosper. So have that in your mind, and then apply this to teaching these young people in youth groups, and you'll see how they're linked. The anti-fragile idea is not just a physical one, it's a spiritual one as well. So being taught things, we can't just spoon feed our young people. Like going to the gym, it's a safe space to break ourselves down, to come back stronger and more resilient. So our youth groups and conversations with these young people can be like this too, a safe space for them to break things down in their minds, being forced to think things through. So that once they get it, they truly get it. They become stronger and more resilient in their personal relationship with Jesus, which I think is so key when we try and answer this question of how can we encourage and embolden them to share their faith. What we want to do is strengthen them. A Christian whose faith is built on the sturdy roots of doctrine and the word of God, and how to apply that to our lives through an honest awe and wonder of the glory of God, will be able to withstand the tough questions that Natalie was talking about at school and the corrosive winds of the world around them for years to come. But for them to be rooted, they kind of need space to root. And when I had to reflect on this question, looking at the church genuinely around the world, I think there can be this tight grip on young people because we're so scared of losing them. But I think what needs to maybe happen is an opening of our grip on them so that they are just on our palm for God to do his work for them. Because if we tightly grip these young people, trying to just spoon feed and ram Jesus down their throats out of fear of losing him, it will suffocate them and suffocate their relationship with Jesus. Like another example would be a great oak tree. So if we're growing a great oak in saplings and small pots, we have to give them space to deeply root. One day we have to take them out of the pot and root them in soil. What I'm not trying to say is to create an individualistic environment, not at all. I think people still tend to these saplings by watering and pruning them, but leaving them to be comfortable in a pot doesn't grow a fruitful tree. So far we've seen the example of Jesus's teaching using questions to answer questions to help people to really think. And this led to us talking about the environment for young people to think by not spoon feeding them and creating space for them. And then finally looked at that anti-fragile idea, which tells us why this is such an important way of doing things, the way that we were designed to learn things. And but the main thing as well to think about is us as leaders. We are the ones who, if we want to try and make these young people be in awe and wonder of God, we too have to be in awe and wonder as well. And so I think that is where the answer lies for our question. How can we embolden and encourage young people? Give them space to first discover and then to be in awe and wonder of Jesus. So how did my youth worker do this for me? Well, he modeled it first, and then he let me discover Jesus myself within a community as well. So guided by lots of wise counsel, but I was the one who started my relationship with Jesus. If you discover something that is truly incredible at the surface level, you're intrigued, and you're more likely to spend time going deeper in your discovery, perhaps in youth groups, and perhaps out of those youth groups. And then you're ever more likely to share it because it's something you want to share. It's something you love. It has to be their faith they uncover, not ours. Because the truth is, when we talk about sending these young people out, into schools and to their football matches or at sleepovers or at parties, we won't be there. Well, I hope we won't be there, because that would be really weird if we're at their sleepovers. But they will be the ones with their faith, their discovery, and their awe and wonder, and their personal relationship with Jesus. And it's from that position that they are truly equipped to talk about Jesus openly and authentically with their friends and the world around them. So, yeah, it's to embolden and encourage these young people to share their faith. I think the first thing is to teach like Jesus, using questions and making people think. Secondly, it's creating an environment and a space for people to think deeply in their own way, with their own minds. So that three, they can be the ones to discover Jesus, because I think it's more powerful and stronger that way. So yeah, that's what I was reflecting on this week, about how we can share and equip and encourage young people as well. So there you go.
Ollie, that's fantastic. Thanks so much. That really, really deep and helpful reflection. I think, it's a good reminder of what discipleship is like, and actually it is costly, because we need to have at the centre of it love, and not just to get people in, but to love them throughout their journey. So yeah, thank you very much. And I'm going to hand to Holly now to lead us into the next section before we go into questions.
Thanks, Tom. So we're just going to go back into our breakout rooms now for a little bit of unpacking this ourselves. So we've heard from some brilliant panelists and some really inspiring ideas, and I'm going to put some more questions in the chat, and we'll broadcast them into the breakout rooms as well. But it's just to help us think about how we're already encouraging our young people in our own contexts, and how we think what we think can be transformational experiences for young people in their journeys of faith. Because I think a common denominator in a lot of the things we've heard so far is that when we have a powerful spiritual experience, that can be in our own evangelism as much as it can be in being discipled or being evangelized ourselves. So I'm going to post the questions, and Tom will pop you into breakout rooms. I think we're all back. I think we've lost a few people to the school run, haven't we? I wonder if we could just do a little bit of feedback from your breakout rooms and the chats you've had, and I wonder if maybe there might be someone from each group that, or if you don't want to share, that's fine, but if there is somebody from each group who'd like to share something that you were talking about, or something that you found interesting in your conversations, if you just maybe raise your hand and unmute yourself, and I'll find someone who's got their hand up, if there's anything you'd like to share about your conversations. This is your chance to unmute yourself. It's absolutely fine if we're just going to move on, but if there is anything from your chats that you found,
go on, I'll throw something in. I'm happy to throw something.
By all means, share. Go.
I think we were talking a bit about how the models that some of us have talked about, some of what Ollie shared particularly, we have to embed through our whole congregation. So, I have a very multi-age congregation, but there's across all the generations, from young people up to our 90-odd-year-olds, there are people who just want to be told, just want to be taught. David teaches, and then right across those generations, from our teenagers right the way through to our 90-year-olds, there are people who want to explore this for themselves. And our vision statement has the phrase question, discover and explore in it. And I think for me, that's really key, that we need to move away from this. We're here for somebody at the front in a dog collar, not wearing mine today, to teach us, to us exploring and discovering together. And even recently, when someone was talking to me about the God for All strategy, one of their criticisms of it was, well, in 1820, when we approved the Liverpool Minutes, it was about being taught, and I had to bang my head against my portable brick that I carry around, to see that's not where we're at. And I think that, we need to move that, but that's right across. I've got some of our teenagers who just want me to tell them, right the way through to that in our 90-year-olds, and we need across the generations to shift our heads into that question, discover, explore. So we reflected on a bit of that in our conversation.
That's great, thank you. I love that discover and explore, those words that seem to have been bubbling up today. And I think in my work with evangelism, trying to equip people to do evangelism, it is a lot about how do we move from thinking about evangelism in a didactic way, about one person explaining something to another person, to more about how do we facilitate shared encounters of the love of God. And I think that's something that's kind of bubbled up from some of those conversations. And anyone else like to share anything? Rachel?
We had a really wide-ranging discussion, but a couple of things that are sort of stuck in my head was listening to people, and really listening and letting the conversation be led by them, and not trying to dictate where you want the conversation to go. And just before we got chucked out of the breakout room, we just started talking about how we need to value young people, and make sure that they feel of worth and as part of the community and part of the church, not a little add-on extra bit that is separated out, but they need to be valued as a contributing part of the church. We did talk about a lot more, but I can't, those are the bits that really stuck in my head.
That's great, thank you. And absolutely, and that young people's faith is, that we can learn from our young people's faith as much as they can from us, which I think is really important. Anyone else like to share anything? David Brown.
Yeah, so I think one of the things we kind of reflected on, that actually with young people, it's not just always it being one person's responsibility or opportunity for conversation or dialogue, and that actually the way we can encourage and embolden young people is having a community of faith that can explore alongside. So there might be the designated youth leader who has the responsibility of the mantle of youth fellowship on a Friday, but there's the members of the congregation who are willing to talk openly about their faith and explore those questions together over coffee after worship or in other places at other times. And I speak as a relatively young person, and I like to think that I always want to hear from other young people because they're my peers and I can relate best to them and engage with them. But I have to say some of the most formational moments for me have been those conversations with those from other generations or other perspectives that have called me to think deeper or wider or further about my experience in relation to theirs. And I think the other thing reflect on that second question was creating that culture of openness and honesty to say, we're not really sure what is going to work and what's not. We're not really sure whether we're all going to be great at this first time, and giving young people an opportunity to try and for it to potentially go wrong, but then most importantly have the opportunity to reflect on that. And sometimes those opportunities are best facilitated not in their immediate context. So it's giving them the opportunity to go and do a bit of social action in a town 20 miles away, or go on mission to another church in another area, speak to another group of young people, because actually that's the place where we can try, speak, share, make mistakes, get it wrong, get a question we hadn't anticipated, and then explore what our answers might be in our own context when we return. So giving young people the space to try and the opportunity to then reflect on that afterwards is really important if we want to seek to encourage them as evangelists.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer in having a go and how that can be transformational for all of us as we deepen in our discipleship. Anyone else want to share anything before we move on? No, I think in that case I'm going to hand over to Meg, who's going to do some kind of Q&A with the panelists.
Hiya. If you have a question for the panelists, please put it in the chat now. We're going to move into a few minutes of asking questions to the panel. So keep sticking it in the chat if you'd like to. We've got a few already on my little list here. So these are questions for Ollie and for Dean and for Tom. And Holly, you can jump in as well if you would like to answer these questions. But like I say, just keep adding them to the chat as we go, and we'll see how we get on. So my first question for the panel is, just starting out in sharing your faith can actually be really difficult. What's one tip that you could give us for just very simply getting started, just dipping your toe in the water of sharing your faith? Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I can begin if you want.
Right, Ollie.
So when I first became Christian, and I didn't really get onto this, sorry, when I started to share my faith a few years later, the first thing that I had to try and do was actually say that I went to church at the weekend. So, for example, I played hockey at the weekend, and people would always be like, "Oh, Ollie, how did you get on at the weekend? How was hockey? What did you get up to at the weekend?" And I went, "Oh, yeah, hockey's good." And then they said, "Oh, what did you get up to on Sunday?" And in the early days, I'd be like, "Oh, nothing much." Blatant lie. I was at church. Then what I had to do later on was actually say I was at church with my mum, and it was very hard to do initially because trying to name church, it actually weirdly gets stuck in your throat sometimes. You just go, but actually I was at church. So that was what I first did, was I had to actually say and be honest what I was up to at the weekend. I was at church, name and shame it, and that's what I did first. I didn't actually talk about Jesus though, that came later.
Yeah, well, that's quite a great first step, really, isn't it? Just to kind of dip that, and I think that works for adults as well as young people.
Oh, definitely.
I say to my friends sometimes, "Oh yeah, I was at church on Sunday." When they say, "What were you doing?" and it just opens that conversation, opens that door, doesn't it? Brilliant. Okay, another question for the panel. This is quite an interesting one, and it's come up a few times, I think, today when we've talked about it can be very scary to share your faith. And so my question to you is this: why do you think it is so scary to talk about Jesus? Okay, why is it so scary to talk about Jesus? So, who would like to take that one?
I can answer some of it. I guess because part of it's because it's quite important, isn't it, for people to know about Jesus. Is that it's like a life and death thing, really, isn't it? And that actually that's kind of what we should be doing. And so I guess it's a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves, isn't it? It's like, oh, we've got this one chance maybe to tell this person about Jesus. I can't mess it up. I can't do it wrong. And I guess there are other things about I don't want to say no or something, or I don't like failing. But I think that's a really big thing. Just to kind of say the other side is that it's not really down to us whether they accept Jesus, whether they kind of take him into their lives. That's down to God and the Holy Spirit, isn't it? We've just to kind of take the step off the boat and say something about Jesus.
Right. Thanks, Dean. Anyone else want to have a go at answering that very difficult question? Why is it so scary to talk about Jesus?
I thought your thoughts on it, Meg, were pretty interesting.
Do you want me to share my thoughts?
Yeah, go on.
I was reflecting on this. Obviously, I think one of the reasons why it's so scary is because we don't want to be rejected. We don't want to be made fun of. And I think particularly when you're a teenager and you're in school and you're embarrassed all the time anyway. When you're a teenager, you're just embarrassed looking in the mirror. So to say that you're a Christian or you've got some sort of faith can be embarrassing. But I was reflecting on why grown-ups who are no longer in school or also find it scary to talk about Jesus. So maybe there's more to it than just that embarrassment factor. And I started wondering whether it's because when you start talking about Jesus and telling somebody else, it makes it real. And there's something about, do some people perhaps, they don't want it to be as real as talking about it will make it feel. Because the minute you kind of acknowledge that this is real, it has a demand on your life. And so is it because we quite like to bumble along in our faith or our church going, and then to talk about it, the reason why it's scary is because then it becomes real. But that's just my ponderings this afternoon, really. So I don't know what anyone else would make of that kind of thinking. Looks like Tom's about to give us some pearls of wisdom there.
I was just thinking, it's a good point that I think, when the more real it becomes, and suddenly, the people around you might think the more fictional it sounds to them. It makes you vulnerable, I guess. And it's nerve-wracking.
Okay, I think we've probably got time for one more question, if that's okay. So quite a personal question, I guess. So people often don't want to say anything, as we've just said, because they're going to get made fun of, and I think that's particularly true of teenagers. Have you ever had to deal with negativity when you've shared something about your faith, and how did you deal with it? Who would like to take that one?
I don't mind jumping in, but I have an opposite experience in that I became a street pastor. You might, some of you might know what street pastor movement's all about. In some places they're called street angels, but I go out on the streets of Canterbury where I live, or at least I used to before lockdown, from 10 o'clock at night to 4 o'clock in the morning, and walk around the streets and help people. And it often ends up involving conversations about faith, because people say things like, "Why are you crazy people out here?" And we say, "Because we're Christians." And when I first became a street pastor, I was terrified about that aspect of it, because I thought people are just going to make fun of us because we're going to get called names. And I have never ever experienced that in my 4 years of being a street pastor. I have experienced so much love from people, and so much gratitude, and so much interest and openness. And people say, "Oh, will you remember me in your prayers, or will you pray for me, or will you tell me a bit about why you're a Christian?" And it blows my mind. I just think if we find the confidence to get out there and start having those conversations, amazing things happen. And it has been transformational for me, probably much more so than it's been transformational for any of the people I've had conversations with, in that I just believe that there is this openness to faith, spirituality, and God's love in a way that perhaps we don't always expect.
That's great, thanks.
I think, for me, I was trying to think back to some moments. I was thinking, school, I suppose like Natalie said, maybe it was a bit more debatey. But I remember, when I used to work in the city, and took one of the interns, so he was in the sandwich year of his degree, to church with me, to a Christian talk that was going on in the city around science and Christianity. And then afterwards, he came along, and afterwards told me he was really angry with me for having invited him to it. And that sort of took me aback, and I was a bit shocked. So I thought, he was like, you got free lunch, and and an interesting talk, and you heard a different perspective. But I think just angry that I'd taken him into that environment. And I think, we've still always remained friends, and I think I just felt, I knew at that point that then that was too much for him at that time, and just to keep the friendship, and I guess just keep loving. I've known him about 8 years now. He was at my wedding last year and stuff. So I think it's just I suppose sometimes when you get those moments, I think exit from the God talk and just go back to the loving them.
And for me, it kind of came in the recent years so my family aren't fully Christian. My mum is, and we're split Christian, non-Christian. So when I start to talk about Jesus and say I'm doing things like this, or like YouTube, it's very public. And when you have your family then say, "Why are you doing this? What a waste. You should just do a normal job, like be a PT or something." It's like, it seems very harsh to hear those words when people think you are just wasting your time and wasting your life that you've been given. So it's kind of, that sucks to hear that. So I always try and encourage myself with, actually, if I really believe what this Jesus thing to be true, then that requires something of me. Like, Jesus doesn't say just be comfortable in your faith and you can ride the wave. Like, he says, okay, go do this, do that. And I try and equip myself through the doing of life, the doing the Christianity, rather than just being, which they both have strengths and weaknesses in that. So definitely when my family are just kind of saying, "What a waste," I kind of remind myself that I'm not a waste. Jesus wants to use us, me, everyone for his kingdom. And that's more important than my grandma's words. That's one for me as well.
Great, thank you so much, panel, for answering those questions. I'm keeping my eye on the time, and I think we've probably run out of time for any more questions, which is a bit of a shame. I've just been given a 2-minute slot just to tell you some things about some of the work that we're doing that may help, because it links in quite closely with what we've been talking about this afternoon. So in the Children, Youth and Family team, as I'm sure many of you are aware, run an event called 3 Generates every year, which is our national gathering for children and young people. Now this year, for obvious reasons, that is not taking place, because it normally happens in October, November time. So what we have launched instead is something called 3 Generate 365. If you have had your wits about you this week on social media, hopefully you might have seen some stuff that we've been pushing out there. But the reason it links in with what we're talking about this afternoon, and as I've been listening to people talking, I see more and more links, and I'm getting more and more excited about it. So 365, 3Gen 365 is a process of year-round engagement with the children and young people. And it's about saying, what is the essence of the 3Gen event? And how could we keep that going throughout the year? So we don't just have to turn up for a weekend somewhere and that's it, but actually we can keep that going. So 3Gen 365 has this year-long focus on, and I think for me, this is the bit I'm the most excited about, if I can say that, but got a focus on expecting God to speak. So we're actually expecting God to say something or to move. And now that doesn't sound too radical, but I think sometimes we're quite surprised when God speaks. And actually it takes us aback a little bit. And so we want young people to actually think that, yeah, God is going to speak and God is going to move. And so because of that, then they start listening, they start praying. And so there's a real focus throughout this next year on children and young people praying and listening, primarily listening to what God has got to say to them. And then when they've heard what God is saying, and whatever that is, and however they hear that, and we recognize it's not a booming voice always, it might be through a song or through nature in 100 different ways in which God speaks to us. Then how can we share that? How can we share with our churches, with our youth groups, with our youth leaders, what we think God has been saying? And in a couple of weeks, we're going to be launching the 3 Generate app. And one of the features of the app is for children and young people to actually feed back what they have heard God saying. And this is a bit that I think links nicely with what we've been talking about this afternoon. Because we've talked so many times about how do we make it normal just to talk about Jesus? So it's not this weird, freaky thing that we do. How do we build confidence in our young people to talk about God? And if we can't get that right within our nice, safe Christian communities, we're going to struggle to do it outside of our Christian communities. And some churches are really good at talking about God, and some churches perhaps aren't quite so confident at talking about God. Some youth groups talk about God all the time, and some not so much. So we're hoping that over the course of this year, when we start talking about prayer more often, and we are listening to God, and then we start saying, oh, I think God was saying this to me, or I'm starting to feel really passionate about this. And it's making those connections between what we care about, what we're passionate about, what we want to speak out about, connecting that with our faith in God, that those two things aren't separate. It's God that inspires us to care about certain issues. It's God that helps us to put a challenge down to society or to the church. So we're going to expect God to speak, we're going to pray, we're going to listen, we're going to share what God is saying to us, and then we're going to respond in whatever way we need to respond. That could be taking action, going on a campaign about something, writing a letter to your MP. It could be just praying for somebody. It could be dropping some chocolate off at your neighbour's house. Whatever the response is to what God is saying to you. And that's what the focus of 365 is, that we're on this journey together. And it's not just children and young people, but it's the whole church. So that sharing that takes place, we really want to encourage the children and young people to share with their church what God has been saying. And as David was sharing with us before, there's a real strength and a power in churches sharing together, the different generations sharing. So as one element of the church shares, the young people share, hopefully the older people in the church will share as well. And then that response, that taking action, that could be an individual response, or it could be a church-based response as well. So it's going to be a really exciting year if people get behind this, if people grasp the vision for this. We are producing loads of resources that will help youth workers to get their young people talking about prayer, understanding discernment, thinking about how we're all connected as one body in the church. There's loads and loads of stuff that is currently out on our website, and more will be released as we go through. We've got some events planned, virtual events for children and young people. in October and November, and then some more district-based stuff coming out in the new year. So if you haven't heard of 365, I would suggest you have a look on our website. And if you've got any questions about it, please feel free to talk to me, send me an email, pick up the phone, and I'm more than happy to answer that. But the excitement for me is, how do we start making it a completely natural thing to talk about God and what God's saying to us, and how that then shapes our lives and drives our lives and our church as well. Tom.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Meg and Holly, for your support this afternoon, and a really, really big thank you to Ollie, Dean and Natalie. It's been so encouraging to hear your words of wisdom for us, and to hear from young people who are so close to Generation Z, closer than us, with passion and enthusiasm. It's been really thoughtful. So yeah, thank you very much. I would just like to share one more thing. So the Evangelism and Growth Strategy has a stream that is specifically for young evangelists, and we're working on really developing that this year, ready. So September 2021, we want to be ready with a resource for 3Gen 365 for that year's, to really work on a 6-week resource that youth workers could use with their youth, leaning on Holly's stream of everyone an evangelist, so that all young people feel equipped in that. And we are going to run a focus group that looks at what this resource needs to be, but also the other part of the Young Evangelism movement, we want to create a community of young evangelists across the Methodist Connection, that's just keeping them in touch with what's going on, and a support network for one another. So we're going to run this focus group on Wednesday the 21st of October, and we've really enjoyed your participation and would love to invite you to that. It's 3 o'clock till 5 p.m, and I'll just put my email in. Oh, Holly's already done that, great, into the comments. So there you go. So that if you'd like to come along, or you know someone that you think would be great to have into that, please send me an email. So we'd love to have you there. It will just help us to deal with the key challenges in the development of the movement, and just think about what these resources need to be, but also how we create community. So the youth group material, we want it to help young people talk naturally about God, incorporating testimony, not just theirs, but also listening to others, equipping young people to share their faith in a relevant way, building their confidence, and giving them confidence to bring truth and light into the world, and to raise up individuals who are spiritually gifted as evangelists. And then as a community, we want to be investing in young people who have or are exploring a particular gifting as an evangelist, to raise them up and challenge them, to bring them together at times, hopefully post-COVID, but also online, and to support them with mentors, so that they can really be developed in that area, so that they're not, sometimes there's that thing with evangelists that become a bit lone rangers from the church. We want them in the church, equipping the church, and supported by the church. So if you are interested in helping us, we really want to collaborate. And that's Wednesday the 21st of October, 3 to 5 p.m. Just drop me an email, and we'll send you the details. But yeah, once again, just thank you for coming. It's been a great afternoon. We've really enjoyed your participation and conversation. And yeah, big thanks to Natalie, Dean and Ollie. You've been fantastic. Thanks very much. And if you would like more of these, we'd be interested to know. So yeah, drop Meg, Holly or me a line. We'd be interested to run more if there's interest to do that as well. Thanks very much.